Great, thank you. Once again, good morning and happy Thursday. This is the June 15th, 2023 meeting of Manhattan Borough Board. We're going to start with a roll call. Community Board 1.
Good morning. Thank you so much. This is Tammy Meltzer.
Hi, Tammy. CB2.
Hello.
Good morning, Susan. CB3.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Tariq. CB4.
Good morning, Jeffrey LaFrancois with Board 4.
Thanks, Jeffrey. CB5.
Good morning, Vicky Barbero, CB5.
Hi, Vicky. CB6.
Morning, Kyle Thide, CB6.
Morning, Kyle. CB7.
Good morning, Beverly Donahue, CB7.
Hey, Beverly. CB8.
Morning, Russell Squire, Community Board 8.
Hey, Russell. CB9.
Morning, Barry Weinberg, Community Board 9.
Thank you, Barry. CB10.
Good morning, Marquise Harrison, CB10.
Thank you. CB11.
Good morning, Xavier Santiago, CB11.
Morning, Xavier, and CB12.
Good morning, Catherine Diaz.
You all, hi, Kathy. You all are here. It makes me so happy. It's nice to see all of you guys. Great. We're gonna jump right in to the next item on our agenda, which is the adoption of the June 2023 Borough Board meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? The agenda is adopted. Next, do I have an approval of the May 18th, 2023 Borough Board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? The minutes are approved. Have we been joined by the borough president yet?
Yes, you have.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Borough President.
Hey, good morning.
The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tricia. Good morning, everybody. Great to see all of you. Happy Pride. We had a really special event last night. Councilmember Botcher and I celebrating Pride Month. Wonderful slate of honorees. Thank you to Macy's for hosting us. And I hope I'll see many of you a week from now, a week and a half at the annual Pride March. We'll be out there strong. Join us in our contingent if you'd like. We had a really great day at the Puerto Rican Parade last weekend. Shout out to CB11 for joining us for that fun day. We have a wonderful slate of new board members on every one of your boards. I'm just so thrilled at the new leadership that stepped up. We have somewhere around 112 new members across all the boards in Manhattan. And I'll just read you a couple of stats because it's really wonderful. About 83% identify as people of color. This is among our new members. Over 50%, I guess, look, 54% identify as female, and looks like several of them identify as gender non-conforming or bigender. We have 20 new members who identify as part of the LGBTQIA community. That's 18% of all new members. Also, we tripled the number of young people, which we define as high school, or college or graduate school. Now totaling, it went from 6% to almost 20% of board members. So a fabulously diverse and impressive lineup of new members. I know all of you are already working with them. You're probably already impressed. So very good stuff. I want to focus my remarks now on the vote that we're taking today in Borough Board, which I think is probably the most consequential vote that we've taken in my time as board president in the past year and a half. We are going to be voting on proposed text amendments, zoning text amendments that are known by the administration as the City of Yes Carbon Neutrality Package. And we've talked a lot here at Borough Board, and you've talked a lot in your own individual boards about what we have to do to fight climate change in city policy. We have to make our buildings more efficient. We have to make our power grid greener and renewable. We have to electrify pretty much everything that moves, but certainly our motor vehicle system. We even have to upgrade the way we manage our food and our waste systems. It turns out that our current zoning code is presenting obstacles to achieve every single one of the goals that I just laid out. And so we're considering a package today that will help to remove those obstacles through a variety of means. And that includes making it easier to have greater coverage of solar panels on roofs and on parking lots. It includes making it easier to roll out charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, and as well as to expand the use of power storage systems like advanced batteries that are very important to electrifying our buildings and more. It would make it easier to do things like have to grow fruits and vegetables on your roof, make it easier to expand composting infrastructure, to do things like install rain gardens in front of our buildings, which are important for resiliency and preventing flooding during heavy rain events. It would make it easier to have more energy efficient facades to buildings, particularly by allowing for greater wall thickness. And I think we have city planning on here today to get into some of the technical details on that. Am I right, Tricia, or anybody? We do. Yes. In fact, I see Eric Botsford's already on. So you'll get your technical questions answered. But I am strongly supporting this package, and I'm very excited that so are Manhattan boards. We've already had resolutions in support of this package voted out of general boards in boards 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, if I'm not mistaken. And I think in most of the others, we've already had an affirmative vote out of the relevant committee. So this is really gaining wide support across the borough, and I'll let the council members speak for themselves, but I think it's fair to say that it's got pretty wide support among the Manhattan Council delegation. So this is important. It's going to help us in our fight to achieve carbon neutrality in New York City. It's already gaining wide support, and I'm really excited for the vote today in Borough Board. So I think I'm going to pause there and pass it back to you, Tricia, but I'll hang out until it's time to start the voting. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Borough President. So I think with that, we're gonna move on to the presentation from City Planning. After that, we will open it up for any public comment that would like to submit testimony, and then we'll go to a vote. But I see if any of the voting members of Borough Board have to leave, which I know that some of you have time commitments and that sort of thing, we'll formally open up the voting now. So you can either register your vote with me, or you can put it in the chat, or you can just somehow let us know in another way which way you're going to vote on this, and we'll take it from there. But we do have a quorum, so with that, I want to try to get as many folks to votes in as possible. So Danielle, we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. I just want to introduce our Manhattan director, Eric Botsford, who many of you know. I think it's his first time at Borough Board since gaining this position at the department, and you're going to see a lot of him. So Eric is going to give a brief introduction, and then Niles is going to present. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Danielle, and thanks, Tricia and Borough President. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. I'm Eric Botsford, Director of the Department of City Planning's Manhattan office. Thank you for taking the time to be here to discuss the City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality initiative. Before we get going, I just want to say that this proposal is the first of 3 zoning text amendments that City Planning is working on as part of the mayor's City of Yes campaign. City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality entered public review in April, just after Earth Day, and we've had excellent conversations with the public, with community boards, and borough boards like this one in the weeks since then. The other 2 initiatives are City of Yes for Economic Opportunity and City of Yes for Housing Opportunity. And just this past Tuesday night, we held a public info session for City of Yes for Economic Opportunity, which I hope you were able to attend. We'll refer that initiative into public review this fall, and housing will come for your review next spring. So back to City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality. This initiative will update our zoning to help New Yorkers take climate action, everything from retrofitting aging buildings to installing solar panels to composting. And it's a very detailed proposal, 17 policies in all. And that detail really befits the gravity of the climate crisis and the importance of our response to it. My colleague, Niles Klingel, will walk through the proposal in just a moment. We've crafted this policy in consultation with key environmental leaders in New York, like the League of Conservation Voters and the Urban Green Council, who support this proposal. And it's critical to meeting our environmental goals and addressing the climate crisis. This is a priority for our administration, for our city, for the whole planet, and we're excited to share it with you and to get your input as the initiative moves forward. So again, thank you for having me here. We hope each of you involved to help us make New York more green, sustainable, equitable, and prosperous. We're here to answer any questions that you have either during the presentation or after the fact. And with that, thank you again for being here, and I'll hand it over to you, Niles. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So thanks for the introduction. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Borough President. Thanks for having me here. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to talk about the research we've been working on at the Department of City Planning related to carbon neutrality. My name is Niles Klingel. I'm a planner in the Central Office of City Planning, and I'm the lead planner on this text amendment. I know many of you have had presentations at your boards on this already, so I will try to keep this as succinct as possible as a refresher to support the voting that's going on this morning. As Eric touched on, this is the first of 3 text amendments that we expect as part of the City of Yes initiative, where Mayor Adams charged DCP and city agencies more broadly to take a fresh look at our regulations to support the city's economy coming out of COVID. They are 3 distinct and independent proposals. Carbon neutrality is in public review currently, but that was preceded by a long period of outreach and engagement and project development, which I'll touch on in a second. Economic opportunity will be beginning public review in the fall, as Eric mentioned, and housing opportunity next year. I know many of the members on the board don't need any explanation on the climate emergency that we're in, but I do want to touch on this and frame the conversation. We are in a climate emergency, and these zoning changes are a piece of the puzzle in solving New York City's carbon emissions. Reducing these carbon emissions is essential if we're going to meet the moment and respond to the climate emergency as a city, state, nation, and global population. When we're talking about carbon neutrality, it's a big topic, many aspects to it. It means a lot of different things to different people. I just want to emphasize the elements of decarbonization that we've really focused on in our work here at City Planning. A carbon neutral city is one where we've reduced overall energy needs first and foremost. So efficiency is critical. Retrofitting for efficiency is critical to meeting the moment and meeting decarbonization needs. Second, a carbon neutral city is one where we've cleaned the energy grid, and there's a lot of work advancing to ensure that the electricity that we all use comes from renewable green sources. And thirdly, it's a city where we've electrified all of the remaining needs, energy needs in the city, whether that's heating, a heating plant in a building or an internal combustion engine in a vehicle, moving those over to electrified systems that run on that clean grid. And the roadmap to 80 by 50, which is New York City's long-term plan on how to achieve carbon neutrality, i.e. cut carbon emissions 80% by 2050, shows on the right here that most of the city's carbon emissions from our worst year in the baseline period 2005 come from buildings. Therefore, reducing the carbon emissions of our city's building stock is essential, and zoning plays a key role, of course, in regulating buildings in that effort. We're building on a very strong foundation here at the department, starting in no small part 11 years ago in 2012 with the Zone Green Text Amendment, which was the first overhaul of our zoning regulations to support things like rooftop wind, rooftop solar, designating where EV chargers are allowed. Really, I would just characterize this as sort of dipping the toe in the water, and really a lot of elective, forward-thinking initiatives, but did not go far enough, particularly in light of some of the things we've seen over the last 10 years. So this is a chance to take those take those provisions and update them in light of the focus on decarbonization, particularly coming from the Paris Agreement, the city's adoption of the roadmap to 80 by 50, the feedback we've gotten from practitioners, so architects, engineers, building owners, and managers, exemplified here by the Urban Green Council's Zone Greener report in 2018, calling on the department to do more. And also recognizing the changed legal landscape, the City Council's passage of the Climate Mobilization Act, the state's passage of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and also the frequent reminders, sobering reminders from the scientific community that as a nation and as a world, we are not doing enough. We are in danger of missing our opportunity to avert climate catastrophe. So building on all of this, we are proposing City of Yes for carbon neutrality, a chance to use zoning to support these larger projects of responding to the climate crisis, and in particular, by removing zoning impediments to urgent retrofitting work at the building scale, adding solar panels, energy storage, and EV chargers across our city. This kicked off in March of last year when the mayor announced his vision of a City of Yes and charged the department to begin work developing these 3 work streams that Eric touched on earlier. Since that time, we've really been engaged with a wide range of stakeholders, technical experts, community members, practitioners, better understanding how we can support this effort. We've also held a number of public meetings in advance of the referral. So oftentimes DCP is criticized for not getting enough out there before the public review process. And so to do better in that regard, in October of last year and in spring of this year, in March, we held a total of 4 public info sessions explaining the state of the proposal as we had developed it at that stage. All of this led up to referral in April of this year by the City Planning Commission beginning the public review process, which I'll touch on at the conclusion. In that process, we've met with over 100. We've had over 100 meetings with various stakeholders, partner agencies, practitioners, community members, advocates, better understanding what are you doing in your work to support the climate goals of the city, and of all things that you've had to deal with, how is zoning specifically impeding that work, or how could it help you? And that has led us to these 4 key goals, which I'll touch on today: decarbonizing our energy grid, our buildings, our vehicles, and our waste streams. First goal, decarbonizing our energy grid. I want to touch on the context here. These are not elements of the zoning text amendment itself, the application before the board, but these are the context that we're working within. And the first and most critical piece of that context is that by state law, by 2040, the New York State energy grid must be 100% renewably based. There's a lot of work happening on a lot of fronts to make that happen, but it will play out also in the city at even our building rooftop scale, where since 2016, we've had a goal of installing over 1,000 megawatts of rooftop solar across the city. To date, all the solar panels that have ever been installed in New York City up until today, some estimates have us at around 300 or 400 megawatts. So we are somewhere between a third and a half of the way there. And we have 7 years to get to completing that goal. So that is a very ambitious rollout of a doubling or tripling of solar panels over a very short time period. Zoning will prove to be a problem there, and we'll talk about that. In addition, to make all of this renewable shift in the energy grid possible, the energy grid itself needs to change. Instead of being a one-way street where fossil assets are fired up and push energy out to consumers, the grid will have to become smarter, more dynamic, and more distributed. Energy storage, advanced battery systems are the glue that will hold that energy grid of the future together. Now, within that context, we've identified 5 specific things we can improve in our zoning regulations to support those shifts that are ongoing. The first relates to rooftop solar, so making sure that our zoning resolution is not unduly impeding the portions of roof that can be covered by solar panels. In many districts, in many cases today, zoning limits the amount of rooftop that can be covered by solar canopies to 25% of the roof, making it difficult for those solar canopies to be economically feasible, or to address other hardships or complications that might arise in the design process. Second, we need to take a similar fresh look at our zoning regulations for open parking areas, less of a concern in Manhattan, but there are 8,000 acres of open parking area citywide. Essentially, there are 2 lists in the zoning resolution: where are those areas allowed and where are solar canopies allowed, and they don't always overlap. We want to address those rules to make sure you can always install solar canopies over open parking areas. Third, we want to update and recognize changes in the energy generation landscape, and in particular, community solar, a program that New York State law and utilities, including Con Edison, have recently begun allowing, where groups of energy electricity customers can band together and specify that they obtain clean energy from a specific green energy asset in their neighborhood. It's a little different than, say, Green Mountain Energy or some other ESCOs that you might be familiar with. Community solar facilities are treated under zoning as a commercial use and are therefore not allowed in many zoning districts across the city. We need to update to allow community solar across the city. Fourth, energy storage. That advanced battery system that holds the grid of the future together is not really directly addressed in our zoning regulations, and it's time to add specific regulations to the zoning resolution to clarify where this essential technology is allowed. And fifth and finally in this goal, onshore wind faces very difficult siting issues in zoning. There are not clear regulations for how to pursue a onshore wind facility that exceeds 35 feet in height, the current underlying zoning regulations for ground-mounted wind. This proposal does not change or expand rules for onshore wind, but what it does do is it creates a specific pathway, an authorization that future applicants can pursue to propose onshore wind in places where it makes sense. So there would be a public review process for each of those applications in the future. This proposal sets that framework for that review process. The second goal relates to our building stock, making sure that our buildings can be decarbonized. They are our biggest source of carbon emissions, and we have over 1 million of them in the city, and they will be around in 2050 when we need to have reached carbon neutrality. That making sure these buildings are decarbonized involves reducing energy consumption through efficiency of the building exterior, as well as electrifying over the long term those building systems that heat and cool the building. Board members are, of course, familiar with Local Law 97, a key piece of the legislative landscape here that is shifting how buildings are thinking about these issues, and are also aware of Local Law 154, the gas hookup ban, which is going to require all new buildings going forward after a phase-in period to be electric. Given that context, there are 3 specific zoning changes we've identified that can improve and support those goals. First relates to electrification retrofits, so where buildings are replacing fossil-based systems with electric-based systems, they will need more space on the rooftops to relocate technology that historically has been located deep within the cellars of the building to be on the roof in close access to the atmosphere. Zoning regulating the rooftop, of course, can provide greater flexibility to locate that equipment on the rooftop. Second, we need to recognize a wider range of building exterior retrofits, including reclads. And you see depicted here a mid-century office building replacing a thin, leaky facade with a high-performing one. We need to ensure that zoning allows the widest range of exterior retrofits. Third, and finally here, we need to update the zone green wall thickness deduction, an incentive that exists for the last 10 years that promotes better than code performance in buildings to recognize changes in the energy code and ensure that we have the next generation of really high performance buildings being incentivized by our zoning. Finally, I also just always want to plug that New York City has a nation-leading program, the New York City Accelerator, run out of the mayor's office to support building owners who are looking at these types of retrofitting projects, to support them with technical assistance, as well as finding pathways to funding, grants, tax abatements, and incentives. Our third goal supports the decarbonization of the vehicles in our city. In particular, private vehicles are one of the issues we've been looking at most closely. There are 2 million private vehicles registered in New York City, and less than 1% are zero emission currently. We lag behind many other metro areas. And one of the reasons is that in New York City, it's particularly hard to find overnight parking and places to charge. We know that there's going to be increased demand for charging because by 2035, New York State has already indicated that all new vehicles sold in the state must be zero emission vehicles. So we know that charging needs will increase over time. We also recognize that a one-to-one transition from internal combustion vehicles to EVs is not the solution. We need to promote greater use of bicycling, pedestrian trips, e-micromobility, and mass transit. Within that context, there are 5 specific changes that we've identified that zoning can can support those goals. The first relates to where are open to the public vehicle charging establishments, commercial establishments allowed. They are not currently allowed in all commercial zoning districts, and the proposal makes the straightforward recommendation to allow them in all commercial districts. Second, in residential districts in particular, there are oftentimes parking spaces that zoning required that are underutilized, where a building owner wants to allow members of the public to come into that facility and use that underutilized parking space to charge up, they actually face a zoning violation. This proposal would eliminate, create a pathway where a certain number of spaces in a zoning required parking facilities could be designated for public EV charging without that violation. Third, generally, rules that already apply in Manhattan core do not apply outside of Manhattan. These relate to the ability to locate car share vehicles, car rental vehicles, and commercial vehicles in public parking garages. These have had success in Manhattan, and we want to roll these out citywide so that other members of other boroughs are able to benefit from these regulations. Similarly, fourth, when it comes to automated parking, special rules apply in Manhattan core that do not apply in most of the other portions of the city. We want to roll these rules out to allow for automated parking, which features less embodied carbon in materials, reduces idling times and energy consumption. Make sure that that option is available throughout the city. And finally, when it comes to bicycle parking, our zoning is generally way behind. We often assume in our zoning regulations that parking is for cars. We want to add clear rules related to where bicycle parking would be permitted, including designated bicycle parking facilities as a commercial use. And the fourth and final goal relates to our solid waste and stormwater streams. There are some straightforward ways that we can reduce stormwater treatment, stormwater running to treatment plants, organic material going to landfill, and the carbon emissions associated with our food. And 4 specific zoning changes we've identified to support that include promoting porous paving by eliminating zoning ambiguities about where porous or permeable paving is allowed, updating our street tree regulations to recognize new typologies like connected tree beds and bioswales or rain gardens and allow for those to be utilized where street tree requirements exist. Third, finally adding for the first time since 1961, the words organics, composting, and recycling to the 4,000 pages of the zoning resolution, giving clear guidance on where these uses are allowed, whether as a manufacturing use, a commercial use, or as an accessory use. And finally, when it comes to rooftop greenhouses, supporting local food production by simplifying the process for adding a rooftop greenhouse to a non-residential building, which today requires a certification from the City Planning Commission, but in this proposal would be administered by the Department of Buildings through the building permit process, simplifying the timeline and costs associated with it. So that's the overview of the 17 specific proposals in this City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality package. We are currently in the public review process. All 59 community boards throughout the city are reviewing it. All 5 borough boards are reviewing this proposal. There will be a public hearing culminating this period on July 26th at the City Planning Commission. We welcome you all to come testify with your feedback on this proposal, whether written or in person. And tentatively calendared for September 13th is the City Planning Commission vote to, based on all the feedback we received, make modifications to the proposal and ultimately, hopefully, adopt it. That will then pass it over to the City Council, who will have 50 days to vote on the proposal. As a citywide text amendment, it will affect all 51 council districts as well. So with that, I want to open up the floor of questions. Thanks for your time and interest, and really looking forward to working with you all to make this proposal better and ensure that we are doing everything we can in our zoning resolution to support responding to the climate emergency. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so I know that we have a couple people who are on a time sensitive kind of situation. So again, you can register your votes with me, or you can put them in the chat. But right now, I think we should go to questions. So we'll go to Barry Weinberg from CB9.
Hi, thanks so much to Eric Mulis for being here and to Danielle. This is a really fantastic text amendment, but we had 4 very, very short questions about certain elements of it. Tricia, do you mind if I share my screen? Just to show the text amendment itself.
Sure. Can you share your screen, or is that not something that you're able to do?
No, I can do it.
Okay, thanks, Barry.
So the first question is a really short one on page 5, which is under 1210 definitions. Under floor area, the definition of floor area was revised to no longer includes floor space that becomes unused or inaccessible within a building in K, and in L, floor space that has been eliminated from the volume of an existing building in conjunction with the development of a new building or major enlargement. And then the other parts that were removed, are very clearly about mechanicals that are added as part of greenhouse gas reductions. But why were K and L removed from the definition of floor area?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Happy to talk about it. The short answer is that these two provisions, which were added in the 70s to respond to situations where folks were actually boarding up old buildings and then claiming the floor area that was no longer accessible in those boarded up buildings in new developments elsewhere on the same property, have been creating problems for folks who are trying to electrify their mechanical rooms. So where mechanical rooms are being reapportioned, reduced in size, relocated to the roof, these provisions, these paragraphs here have actually been causing problems obtaining building permits. They're also not, they have served their purpose in a lot of ways. The types of projects that we were talking about in the 70s don't really exist in the market in New York City today. So with that in mind, and I apologize, there's also an annotated zoning text. I want to make sure that's available to everyone. I will share the link in the chat, which has commentary on the side explaining the various changes. That is the rationale for making those adjustments.
Got it. And then the next question covers like a bunch of similar revisions in certain sections. So in 23.622, which is about residential districts, but then there are 3 more of these for commercial, community facility, and manufacturing. It's usually under 4, and then there's a variation here. But the main issue is for obstructions on the roof, like elevator or stair bulkheads, water tanks, energy infrastructure equipment, and accessory mechanical equipment. In R6 through R10 districts, which is most of Manhattan's residential areas, they've increased the permitted height for those from 25 feet above the height of the building to 55 feet, which sounds really excessive. Like I understand 35 feet, if certain pieces of equipment need 10 more feet, that makes sense. But what in these permitted obstructions requires 55 feet of height?
It's a great question. So the current rules, I have a table I could pull up, but happy to keep the text up for now, that summarizes the changes of the proposal. The existing regulations in R6 through R10 districts for buildings that have permitted heights greater than 120 feet are actually 45 feet. So the proposal here in those districts, in those scenarios for those large buildings, is to allow 10 feet of additional flexibility. That is so that folks can locate and stack, in many cases, elevator cores, as well as electrified heating and cooling systems on top of that mechanical bulkhead or stair bulkhead or combined bulkhead. We've heard from practitioners that they often face a lot of competing demands on their rooftop, and that flexibility, that additional 10 feet in this case, is sorely needed to ensure that they can electrify.
Okay, that is still confusing to me because we're talking about like 5 stories of extra height, which in some cases would be nearly half the height of the building for mechanicals and rooftop permitted obstructions or mechanical equipment. And I mean, if I'm going to stop sharing, because I think folks will understand that this language is just repeated in areas for commercial, community facility, and manufacturing. But if you want, like, could we see that table? I'm just very curious what energy infrastructure equipment or mechanicals take up, 5 floors of height above what's normally permitted.
Sure thing. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Oh, this is just, okay.
So this is a table summarizing the changes here. Basically, what we're trying to do is move into a 2-tiered system, recognizing that electrified equipment oftentimes takes 1 or 2 forms. So where there is decentralized equipment, you have multiple heat pump VRFs on the rooftop. A two-tiered approach allows for a broader coverage at a lower height, as well as for systems where there's going to be a centralized heating and cooling that is electrically based on the roof, would need a smaller coverage but a greater height. Now, recognize that
I'm so sorry, Niles, to interrupt you. I think that the BP has to jump to another meeting, so I want to get the answer to continue to get the answer to Barry's question, but can I just register the borough president for a vote?
Thank you, Tricia. Sorry to hop in, everybody, but I will be voting yes. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Niles.
I actually have to run as well. It's Councilmember Powers. Can I register my vote as well?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember. Go ahead.
No problem. I'll be voting aye. Thanks.
And Councilmember Abreu also registered his vote as a yes to me in the chat. Niles, I so apologize. If any of the other council members have to run to a meeting, just go ahead and chat me and we'll try to get your vote registered, but I'll pass the floor back to you. I apologize again.
No, not a problem at all. And really appreciate that. Thank you, Borough President and council members, for your support. Barry, did I answer your question?
I mean, it helps to understand the difference between the dispersed versus centralized, but if you have any illustrations or examples of very high mechanicals like that or permitted obstructions on the roof, I would love to see them just to understand what form these may take in the real world.
Absolutely. I do have one illustration at my fingertips and be happy to follow up with you on some other work we've done. But basically, this is an illustration of that two-tiered system. Let me know if you can't see my screen. But there is the broader percentage up to 50% at that 15-foot height, and then the higher heights limited to a smaller percentage cap, recognizing that there are things like elevator and stair bulkheads and with overruns that may be good places to place electrified equipment on top of as well, to ensure that more of the rooftop could be used for passive recreation and things like that. I'll be glad to follow up with more imagery, but thanks for raising it.
And just to, sorry, Barry, just to answer Tammy's question, kind of for everybody to hear. So Tammy asked, we had circulated a resolution that we thought was fairly basic, but also kind of tried to find the common ground between the community boards who have passed resolutions on this. Just like in the past, when we've passed resolutions on this board where there are minor edits to be made or things to add to it, or to Tammy's point, if there are conditions or pieces that you want to add to it, as long as I mean, I think that it's fine we're happy to take those notes in, and then I can circulate something that's a final draft. And I kind of thought that we may have a few things come up that you'd like us to add to that if needed. If it's not going from like a yes to a no sort of thing, then I think that the votes will still count, and I'll share still with everybody the final draft to make sure everybody's okay with it before after this meeting, if that makes sense. Just like we've done for budget, just like we've done for other things when we've passed resolutions on this. So I hope that that makes sense to everybody here. But with that, I'll share it to Tammy, and I see that Councilmember Brewer would also like to vote and speak. So Tammy, I will go to you and then to the council member.
No, go ahead to the council member if they have to leave. I can wait. I'm not worried.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Brewer. Oh, and thank you, Tariq. I know it's a busy time right now. Okay, I actually will give the floor to Tariq Durrell, to cast his vote. It's a very hard time for folks in education right now. There's the end of school, end of year stuff going on. Tariq, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Tricia. I vote yes on behalf of CB3.
Thank you, Tariq. I've got Tammy and the council member both deferring to each other. So Tammy, maybe you should.
No, council member first, always. Gail's all right. Gail, okay, so Gail's got some tech issues, so I'll go. We did a yes with conditions at CB1. There was a lot of concerns that came out that we haven't seen a ton of clarity on. One is similar to what Barry was talking about, and about the creation of mechanical or similar types of voids by the installation of solar panels on the rooftop, and making sure that that is not possible because we've already seen that in CB1. So that's something that was very important to us to make sure that that was addressed by city planning. And to address the possibility for green roofs, where allowing for 100% solar panel coverage. There wasn't enough definition for our purposes on the ability. If you look at, for example, PS41, although not in my board, and the positive impacts that green roofs had, we think that that should have been far more robustly addressed in this. And the text amendment should note that it has no impact on other agency opportunities for expansion of green initiatives, such as bus stops, for example. The JCCO new bus stops that were ordered have zero green anything, and I don't know a bus stop that wouldn't benefit from some additional lighting, through solar for safety and security, and anything else that can come with it. So that was a big thing for us, because we know that the new bus shelters that were ordered have nothing green about them, and they're big. The text amendment should separate legislation should address the inherent energy supply and delivery monopoly seemingly being created for Con Ed to the potential detriment of the city residents as a captive customer. So it was a big concern that we're going to be handing so much to Con Ed, and that it really is a monopoly. There is not enough robust diversity to provide competitive process in the city for commercial or residential. And then, of course, because we have a rather large portion of our district that's landmark, there was a lot of concern about the additional heights and how they apply to landmark buildings. There was also concerns raised about the inshore windmills in dense urban environments. We assume city planning would not allow that to happen in a dense urban environment, but we didn't see it spec necessarily.
City Council.
Thanks, Tammy. Does anybody from city planning want to address anything that Tammy mentioned?
Yes, and I was just a little bit garbled on my end. Tammy, the last point you were making about DCP not allowing something to happen in a dense environment, I just wasn't able to hear the specific concern there.
Inland windmills. You can imagine we're not looking for an inland windmill in the middle of the South Street Seaport.
Absolutely, nor is the department. The real test case there is based on an example on Long Island Sound out in Fort Totten. FDNY has a training facility. That is really sort of the case study, a community facility campus located in a residence district that really has limited pathways forward. We're anticipating this along Long Island Sound in Eastern Queens and Southern Staten Island, the southern end of the harbor, where wind speeds are sufficient to actually make an application worthwhile. But again, I just want to emphasize this proposal doesn't permit any wind turbines anywhere. It just creates a specific and clear pathway those applications would follow. I totally understood on the energy delivery monopoly. Obviously, you're aware as a zoning text amendment, we have limited ability to get involved in that question, but it's absolutely feedback that we can share with the Chief Climate Officer, staff, and the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who are coordinating all of these efforts. And when it comes to mechanical voids, as you know, the department's been really eager to address mechanical voids. Nothing in this proposal, as far as we are aware, would exacerbate or interface with mechanical void issues. But to the extent that the board has specific concerns there, happy to look into those more deeply and make modifications to the proposal if necessary to address that. Thanks very much for the really thoughtful questions.
I see the council member was able to unmute, so go ahead, Councilmember.
Well, no, I don't want it. I think it's a great proposal, so I just didn't know when we're supposed to give our little updates, or I could do it later, whatever's good for you.
Gotcha. Okay, so we'll keep you, we'll move through this and then we'll go back to you. Thanks.
Sounds great.
I want to call everybody's attention. I don't know if Marquise is still able to join us, but he messaged me and told me that he would like to vote in favor of the resolution as it stands, but also wanted to, oh, sorry, Marquise, you're on, so I won't speak for you. Go ahead.
No, I was agree. I do want to vote for the resolution. I was just sharing for the record, CB10 had a robust discussion both last month and this month in our general board, and I just shared the recommendations we had. This is not to change the resolution. It was just to share what CB10 discussed and what we had. And I vote yes.
Thank you. I want to also just give a shout out to Lizette Chaparro, who's our director of land use, who's on the call. She's been taking notes throughout this, and so Tammy, to your point, to Marquise's point, we can everything that everybody is saying we're taking down in notes, and so anything that needs to get edited or adjusted or added some extra language, or if there's any other follow-up that needs to be done in order to hammer home certain points or you know addition, kind of do some follow-up, Lizette's on, will take notes on this and we can follow up just like we've done for other votes. Okay, unless I see any other votes from or questions from the voting members of Borough Board, I'm going to turn it over to members of the public. If any member of the public would like to make a statement on this, please raise your hand. We'd like to ask you just to limit your comments to about 3 minutes. But if you raise your hand, then we'll move you over into a panelist and give you an opportunity to speak. Go ahead. Thanks, Jeffrey. And yes, and there's been just a request. I know that it's a busy time of year for folks, so if we can just try to make sure that we try to keep comments brief, then to keep those votes in and to move this along for everybody. I want to make sure that everybody can still participate in all parts of our meeting. So do we move over the member of the public who raised his hand to speak, or their hand to speak?
Yes. Chris Waddell.
Chris?
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I don't know why my camera won't go on, but I am actually here and I put on a jacket too. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Widello. I'm the Director of External Affairs for the New York State Association for Affordable Housing. Our 400 members build the majority of affordable housing throughout New York State, utilizing either city or state subsidy. And we are absolutely in favor of the city of yes for carbon neutrality. You know, New York is already behind meeting solar energy goals, and buildings account for over 70% of all overall emissions. This proposal, this zoning text amendment, will help address this by providing building owners, architects, government agencies the desperately needed flexibility in affordable housing can undergo green retrofits and add solar energy to rooftops. You know, many of the buildings in Manhattan and other areas were built long before energy efficiency was a priority, and the modern tools were available to conceptualize this. So, and some were built in very low-lying areas that are particularly vulnerable to climate threats, storm surges, and rising sea levels. And we've seen the impacts that Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Ida, and other disasters have had on the area. So we partnered with the Citizens Housing and Planning Council to do a study, and it was released back in 2022 that showed the possibility of this zoning text amendment change to expand solar energy production. The City of Yes carbon neutrality proposal would allow elevated solar panels to cover over 100% of a roof area, could increase potential solar energy generation by 290%. This is really just a massive step to improve solar energy progress in Manhattan, a need that was only going to grow with electrification continues to gain prominence. Furthermore, it's worth mentioning that 15 feet of height for elevated solar trestles is the minimum height required. A 20-foot allowance would allow for more separation between heating, ventilation, air conditioning equipment, and the panels, which would mean better air circulation and more efficient operation. This text amendment would also enable building retrofits using exterior insulating panels, which help prevent energy waste. Adding insulation inside a building often reduces apartment size and leaves gaps in the facade for heat to leak. Due to floor area regulations, developers are often prevented from installing exterior platting, and this can help remove those arbitrary and outdated restrictions. I think overall, we've submitted testimony with some other, pieces that we find particularly important about this, and obviously support this without conditions. Our industry looks forward to working with the city to implement this, and we'll look forward to having conversations with anybody who would like to discuss. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, one more call for any other members of the public who would like to submit or speak or submit testimony on this. I think Harry Gale from Councilmember Mennon's office would like to cast a vote.
Thank you, Tricia. The council member votes in the affirmative.
Thank you so much. It's been recorded. Unless anybody has any other comments or things to add, do I have a oh, there's Russell.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to incorporate, we actually just considered this last night and passed a resolution supporting City of Yes for carbon neutrality with one comment, which is we just asked that DCP look at the impact of tall buildings on climate change. Basically, that was the comment, that they consider that.
Thanks, Russell.
Thanks.
Does anybody want to put forward a motion? So again, these notes, these comments have been all taken note of. We're happy to either try to incorporate those that make sense as additions to the resolution. Happy to add on comments on top of that. We will circulate kind of final draft of everything to everyone after this meeting. Barry?
I would like to propose that we amend the resolution to yes with conditions. I think that items K and L under floor area that, prevent unused or inaccessible space from counting against FAR should be retained, or edits to them should be more tightly scoped to address the issues that are intended to be addressed by their removal. I understand that this was a provision put in the 70s and we see less abandonment now, but none of us know what the future holds. Commercial office space vacancies are rising dramatically. And I think it's a revision that was put in for a purpose, and that purpose is still useful. And then I have, one other proposed amendment, but I don't know what the other members of Borough Board would think about that. So I'd love to hear any discussion they have.
Okay, we'll go to Xavier.
Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry, I'm working from home today. My youngest is out of school now for the summer. I couldn't copy and paste, so I'm going to read in for the record, because our Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee met last night and voted yes with conditions, and I'll read it into the record. Community Board 11 implores city agencies to work together on interagency coordination items within the zoning text amendment, including but not limited to composting, bike safety, street trees, and stormwater runoff. Successful collaboration in advance of implementation will assist in limiting confusion and adoption, prevent gaps in jurisdiction to process, and promote a coordinated approach. Community Board 11 has concerns regarding the 100% permitted obstructions on rooftops for solar panel implementation. The city should allow for a review of obstructions for solar that exceed 50% to allow for input from the community board, directly adjacent businesses, and directly adjacent residents to prevent negative impacts to building relationships. Community Board 11 also has concerns regarding the lack of structure to manage the energy transfer for on-site generated electricity. The city should create a process to describe the allowable sale of generated electricity by landlords/property owners to energy suppliers with the potential impacts to tenants in mind. So that was the position, and those were the conditions from Community Board 11. It passed unanimously through our committee, and I don't see any reason why it will not pass from our full board in just about 2 weeks. So thank you. And I'll send this to Lizette as well. So
Thanks, Xavier. Russell, did you want to add anything? Go ahead, Susan.
Oh, thank you. This went through our land use committee last night too, and while there's definitely broad support, the one thing that people kept coming back to is how do these things play out in our neighborhoods? More of our, we have so much of our district is within one historic district or another, and there was deep concern about how people are going to make these things happen and what is feasible. And the one thing people that they kept talking about was a need to have it explained, to have an education process that doesn't just explain what the elements are in general, but how they really play out in the specific neighborhoods on these streets with these historic buildings and all of the limitations that they present, the added complexity that comes with what you can and can't do, with buildings that are well over a century and a half old, and that in order for people to feel comfortable and stay and support it, not just in a general sense, but believe that they can actually be participating in this, there has to be some formalized, consistent process that shows that it's going to work in your neighborhood, it's going to work on your block, and we're going to look at your specific types of buildings and show you what's possible. So it was just that it's like too many people were, the comments were that this is great, but is this a one size fits all? And they want to know that it really works in CB2 as well as in the rest of the city.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Go ahead, Vicky. Oh, Vicky, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Very quickly, our full board passed a yes approval. It wasn't with a condition, but I'd like to mention it because it was part of the resolve that we asked the Department of City Planning to reform the City Environmental Quality Review Technical Manual, both generally for all sections of the manual and more specifically for including as within scope the environmental impact of any new development on a neighborhood solar panel installations. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. I don't know if I've heard, so to Susan's comments before, I'm not going to speak on behalf of DCP. So if DCP wants to respond to anything there, I just say that the presentation is the presentation that we got there. It's not specific to CB2, or I don't know if they gave any more. Clearly, it doesn't sound like they gave any more specific information about how it would impact CB2 or a specific area. But I'd say, we have the information that we, unless actually DCP, do you want to comment on anything that Susan had mentioned?
Sure. Well, I think one of my key takeaways with the comments on CB2 is the fact that much of it is located in one historic district or another. And so just to that point, I want to emphasize that the LPC review procedures that apply for any sort of external alteration are going to continue to apply. So where zoning may become more flexible to allow more of the rooftop to be covered by solar, that's still something that has to be reviewed by LPC. Those installations in those contexts will have to be designed in a way that they are minimally invasive. And actually, in that case, zoning flexibility is really helpful there too. That would enable practitioners that are trying to develop, to design a rooftop solar canopy that meets what LPC's expectations are for a minimally visually invasive solar canopy, that they don't run into some sort of zoning headache in the back side of their building due to a coverage or a setback requirement. So really the idea here is by giving greater zoning flexibility, we can address a lot of the specific issues that present themselves on each unique building. Every building is certainly unique. And I just want to emphasize that LPC's review procedures in historic districts and for landmark buildings will continue to apply.
Go ahead, Barry, if you want to.
This is just a question to DCP about the same issue I raised. Do you think it's possible to amend the striking of items K and L from the floor area definition to specifically say, floor space in mechanical rooms that becomes unused or inaccessible, or to really focus in on what you're trying to do with that language rather than striking, the entire provisions?
Absolutely. Happy to consider recommendations specifically there, whether from the borough board, from your community board, or just to follow up directly afterwards.
Okay, then I'd like to kind of ask the other members of borough board again what they would think about adding that as a condition to the resolution, that these provisions.
Can
Sure.
you just I'm struggling actually just to understand what's exactly, can you give us fresh the language again that you're suggesting?
So I would say as a condition to our reso, with the condition that items K and L under the definition of floor area, which I think is 1210 in chapter 2 of Article 1, be retained with language modifying them to allow floor space that becomes unused or inaccessible or that to allow mechanical room floor space that becomes unused or inaccessible within a building. And so K and L would be retained for that purpose. And then just it would implement the reason for removing these within the language of K and L rather than striking them completely.
Jeffrey, go ahead.
I have a process concern on any amendment, given we have votes registered. And that while I understand completely where my colleague on board 9 is coming from, if we open on one topic, it's going to open the nuance to them all. And I'll be abstaining because we haven't formally voted as a board on this, but I would have a bunch of stuff to add on the solar stuff. I'd have a bunch of stuff to add on the EV stuff. So I'm going to encourage that we don't amend what's been put forth today for 2 reasons: process on votes already registered, and the waterfall effect. I'm concerned that would happen were we to entertain one. I think we'd have to consider a lot more as well. Thanks, Tricia.
We'll go to, so what I'll say is just because we've like kind of set this kind of precedent in the past. So what I'll say is that in general, what we've done is that if it's considered a minor edit or something that doesn't essentially change the core of the resolution, then we've taken in these comments and tried to find happy ground with all of this stuff. I've been trying to kind of message our Lizette on the side, trying to figure out with some of the other comments that Tammy and others have made, if we can add them on, because at the end of the day, this is about the text amendment. So trying to take the vote on that, but the other points of impact or interagency coordination or other things like that are absolutely well taken. So we're trying to make sure that we can capture those things. This has kind of been my attempt to try to find a happy medium here. I want to be sure that to Jeffrey's point, though, that nothing that is being proposed is so consequential that it actually makes an actual impact in the overall resolution in a way that people would feel is bigger than a minor edit, which I'm not honestly sure if this one does or not, but we'll take Russell's comment and see if he wants to comment on this as well.
Yeah, it seems to me that comments rather than conditions are sort of more acceptable and more along the lines of what you're talking about in terms of things that aren't sort of materially changing the resolution. So I guess if it's acceptable to other, board chairs, and is it, our contribution to this for board 8 was a comment anyway, but to the extent that I guess these can be phrased as comments rather than conditions, it seems like it's sort of easier from a procedural standpoint to incorporate it. And I do think in the past on stuff like this, we've sort of incorporated everybody's feedback and frankly, I think, we can do that with any kind of commentary or additions that CB4 has also, and do it that way again, if it's acceptable to Barry, if a sort of comment suffices rather than a condition.
That makes sense to me, but I will give it back to Barry to
I mean, I would prefer a condition, but I mean, if that's the happy medium, we can also do a comment.
I'm looking for anybody else to weigh in on. It feels like we're leaning towards comments. We will add these to comments, and of course, everybody can take a look at this, and if you have a major concern, we can, I'm happy to go back and forth on this on emails and figure this out. Russell, thank you for this suggestion. Lizette, I know this is happening, but is taking notes on everybody's comments on this. So after we get done with this vote, we'll circulate what the final language of a resolution is. Right now, the resolution it feels like we're settled on the resolution standing as it is, but we'll submit some additional comments that reflect some of the other pieces that have been highlighted for every board. Vicky's giving me a thumbs up. Tammy's raising her hand, so go ahead, Tammy.
I'd need to see it in its thing because I appreciate what Jeffrey's saying, but there has been a precedent and there is a lot of commonality on what some of us have already said. Mine too came out of committee, but we had 3 presentations on this, so I'm super confident in voting today because of where we are at. Our comments on our committee level, and ours was a joint with environmental protection. So the comments have stayed for 3 months, so I'm super confident on being able to vote if there are ways to incorporate the feedback. My concern about making them comments is it's like a public comment. Please don't be offended when I say this for DCP, but a comment is very different than a condition. And I think that if the community boards, for the most part, agree on the conditions, and there are a lot of points of agreement, then that should be a condition, not a comment. Because a comment is just a comment.
Yep, thanks. Xavier?
Thank you, and I'd like to echo that point, that in my experience being involved with the board and the process in the city, that the conditional statements tend to carry more weight than a comment on. Oftentimes we found in our experience in Community Board 11 that no with conditions gets more traction than yes with conditions, but however, seeming that there's a lot of synergistic overlap of our positions, including them as conditional statements, I would not be opposed to yes with conditions in this instance. It's more about how we navigate it going forward and making sure that all stakeholders are engaged in the process because of the way our city has developed and evolved over the centuries, and how we maintain the integrity and the aesthetic as we reimagine. It's not like we have, as I've said to a lot of our new members, that etch-a-sketch moment where we shake and we get to develop exactly how we want. So we have to find a tenable pathway forward that allows for some margin of error. So I'm in agreement of a conditional statement.
Okay. I hear everybody's comments on this. My only issue here is trying to I think that Barry's kind of input here was on the change, a change in the Floria, kind of the text piece, which was kind of hammered home with Barry, but we didn't necessarily see that in other resolutions from other boards. I think the interagency coordination piece is something that was echoed in a couple boards. So that's something that Lizette, we should think about how we can incorporate that into the reso. Tammy, I'm assuming that Lizette has all of the notes on what you've said, but can you just please remind me, do we still have Tammy on this call?
Oh yeah, I'm here, sorry.
Sorry, Tammy, can you I'm trying to make sure I find common ground here for the pieces that are included. Can you please remind me what you were referring to specifically that was similar across the boards?
The mechanical spaces and similar voids created by installation of the solar panels. That was both Barry and us.
Also, there's a book in my drawer.
And CB5 had the same. All of us, and I couldn't remember. I think Xavier and Russell may have said the same. And then our point was impact on other agency opportunities for expansion of green initiatives, such as DOT with expansion of solar in bus stops. So not limiting that, and addressing green roofs. We are allowing for 100% solar panel coverage. And our concerns with creating a monopoly for Con Ed and depriving the public of the potential city residents, both residents and commercial, of becoming captive customers with no alternatives.
Okay. I got you. Okay, so all good points. Again, what the resolution that we drafted was really taking every single kind of committee's comments and their committee and the resolutions that were passed out of full boards. So while strong, I will talk to Lizette about the mechanical void piece to that, because that one I think was something that I think multiple boards kind of touched on, but these other ones, the DOT initiatives, the captive audience piece, I do feel like those ones are more additional comments to be added, because it's not something that I saw from other boards, if that makes sense. Like I want to try to find a reso that reflects all the boards on this. But maybe DCP wants to comment on the mechanical void piece.
And I do think that I believe at least one, if not two other boards made comments about Con Ed being the sole provider.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I saw that. But okay, I'll take a look at that. Thanks, Tammy. DCP, do you guys want to comment on anything that Tammy raised? Again, specifically thinking about the mechanical voids piece. I think you already said the Con Ed piece, like noted, kind of, but you may not have a formal role in that. I forget what you said, but go ahead and if you don't mind.
That's right. We don't have a formal role there, but that's absolutely feedback we can bring back to the Chief Climate Officer's staff and the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, just to keep reiterating that issue in the broader context of decarbonization work. On the mechanical voids, we certainly don't want to be creating mechanical voids. I'm happy to take a look at or follow up with Tammy, take a look at the specific recommendation there. I think we're on the same page. So I want to make sure that the proposal is watertight there. And then on Barry's point, which also kind of touches on mechanical space and floor area, I think that it's a point well taken. We'll absolutely go back, take another pass at that edit, be more precise there. There's no reason not to be. So I really appreciate all that feedback too.
Russell, did you want to add anything to that?
Sorry, the question was to me.
Yeah, sorry, your hand was raised.
Oh, that was unintentional.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I think where we've landed here is that everything that was kind of raised in terms of Barry's comments and Cammy's comments, DCP seems to kind of be in agreement of the spirit of what's going on here, that you are going to go back to look at the tightening of that language. We can emphasize at home I still think we can emphasize this stuff home in comments, but I do, to Tammy's point, think that the mechanical void piece, which I think has been echoed on different boards, we can try to adjust in the language of the reso to make clear. Lizette, if you could give me a thumbs up or some sort of indication that that's something that we can do. And then with the Con Ed piece, I don't know, just because I I appreciate that multiple boards have said it, but I don't know if it has a direct relation to the text amendment enough, but would Lizette, but we can either try to find language in the reso or would make a comment somehow that indicates that multiple boards have also raised this as a concern.
I think that's right.
Is that
Yeah.
satisfactory?
Sorry, I can't find the thumbs up, but yes.
Okay. I just want to look at, sorry, I want to make sure I see Barry's comments here. Text 55 allowance concentrated mechanical equipment. Yes, we talked about mechanical equipment and mechanical voids. Okay. So taking in those comments, making those adjustments to the resolution, specifically, I'm just looking here. Thank God I'm not the main person who's taking notes on this, but we'll rely heavily on Lizette. But taking into consideration the other pieces of this, the additional comments on floor area text, interagency coordination, and then making adjustments for in the language of the reso to better reflect the mechanical void piece. We want to talk DCPD, if you have any comments more on the other efforts by other agencies. Cami had mentioned like bus stops and bus shelters and that sort of piece, would want to reflect that, and then would also make additional kind of special comments on the Con Ed and monopoly sort of thing. But do you want to comment on bus shelters? I think it's more than bus shelters. Sorry, Tammy, but it's other opportunities for other agencies to make changes and contributions to this space. If that's Tammy?
Yeah, and if I understood Tammy's point correctly, this text amendment need not be the last word on all of these issues, and it need not be something that precludes other agencies from doing sustainability initiatives in all of their projects. So that is absolutely a point that resounds with us, and that is something that we'll continue to take back and advocate for when we're working with other agencies routinely. And specifically, I'll bring this particular piece of feedback back to the Chief Climate Officer staff in the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who's coordinating all the agencies when it comes to this subject. So I totally appreciate that and agree.
Okay, Lizette, I apologize for being so choppy with this, but just reading comments really quickly. Do you think you have all of that down so that we can make necessary changes and edits, both an additional comments that reflect that multiple boards have hit on certain topics, and then as well as changes to the resolution that would reflect the like the mechanical void piece to this?
Yes, I've got it all written down, and we'll get it organized and circulate a new copy of the reso to folks.
Great. And then can we just make sure that you just you know this, I'm sure, but I want to make sure that we just copy and paste Barry's. We can take note of the comments on this chat so that we have it. I don't know if the chat actually gets reflected over when we put this on YouTube. So just so that
I've copied it over already. So, and I know Xavier, you sent the text via email, so I've got that in our notes as well. So we'll just get it organized and get it update the reso.
Okay, and then Tammy, I see one more piece from you, a note about inclusion of green roofs. Can you
Stephen knows, I think, what I'm talking about from DCP, that they came, and Eric might as well. They presented so many times. It was a really robust conversation based on it being something that's productive. They told us they'd come back, but we didn't see anything in the new legislation, with that kind of a, it's very tech oriented towards solar, but not as robust about green roofs to lower carbon and things like that.
Okay. I don't see any problem with adding something like that as well, but can you, if it's anything, Stephen, you said knows, but I don't know who Stephen is. Oh,
staff at City Planning that presented, so definitely can have a deeper dive with Stephen on that. I mean, I understand in principle the concern, making sure that's clear in the zoning text, providing greater latitude for green roofs. We've provided greater latitude in this proposal for additional roof thickness. That language is mostly oriented towards insulation, adding insulation to existing rooftop. I think that that's something that we can take back and make an improvement there to make sure that that allowance need not get in the way of a green roof or could be used by a green roof. So I appreciate that. And we'll follow up with Stephen.
Thanks, Tammy. Okay, so I think that that's reflective of everybody's comments. I think that where we've landed is that we're going to be adding some additional comments along with the resolution. Some of them will also reflect that multiple boards have kind of raised some issues with, or raised other concerns, I'd say, that want to be addressed in the kind of space of carbon neutrality and other issues related to that. Is going to be some changes to the resolution itself, but it doesn't necessarily, I don't think anything is reflective of a kind of major change that, you know, would warrant other voting. But we will try to get all of these comments in, make these adjustments, and then send final text over to all of the voting members of Borough Board by, I'd say, latest next week. And if there's any sort of major concerns, although we are I'm gonna call the vote in a minute here once there's a proposal to adopt a resolution. But I will say that, you know, the goal of this and the reason why we had to do this now at Borough Board is because the public hearing is coming up, and we want to make sure that we are submitting our comments in time and that our voices are heard on this. So with that, is there any motion to move forward?
I call the question. Move forward.
Thank you, Tammy. Call the question on the resolution that was well, along with changes and additional comments as we discussed. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm going to do a roll call vote for this one. And if you don't mind, I just want to start with, I see Elsie Encarnacion from Councilmember Ayala's office. I see Eddie Amador from Councilmember Rivera's office. I will go to you first just to get the votes of council members. Eddie or Elsie?
We vote aye.
Ayala is a yes. Eddie?
Good morning. Councilmember Rivera votes aye.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to Community Board 1.
Community Board 1 votes yes with the annotations.
Thank you. CB2?
CB2 votes yes.
Thank you. CB3 is counted as a yes. CB4? I think Jeffrey, I will go back to Jeffrey, but I think Jeffrey is abstaining. But I will come back to him. CB5?
CB5 votes yes.
Thank you, Vicky. CB6 has already cast their vote, but Kyle, if you're on and would like to cast your vote verbally. I think he may have had another call. CB6 said yes. CB7?
Yes.
Thank you, CB7. CB8?
Yes.
Thank you, CB8. CB9?
Yes, on the reso with revisions.
Thank you. CB10? Oh, sorry, Marquise said yes. CB11?
Aye.
Thank you. CB11, CB12?
Yes.
Thank you. And Jeffrey asked me to come back to him. Jeffrey?
Sorry, I was checking with district manager and co-chairs, et cetera, and I'm just not in a place to vote yes or no, so I'm going to have to abstain today. Sorry for that, Trisha.
No, it's okay. Please don't apologize for your vote. We understand.
Well, you know me, I like to take a position, so it's tricky on a yes or a no, but appreciate everybody's time and conversation this morning. Thanks. I'm abstaining.
Thank you. So there is, of course, you can submit public comments, but there's a public hearing coming up, but we will do our best to, again, make all of those kind of changes, and we'll send around final language by next week. I want to thank all of you. I know we put a lot of pressure on you all to take this up in your committees and to pass this stuff and to be prepared to vote. And I really appreciate it. I don't like giving firm deadlines like this. It's tough, but you all are actually more accustomed to this than I am. So I very much appreciate you doing the work on your boards to try to consider this, and also very much appreciate all of your comments. Very much so. I always kind of walk away from these things and I'm just so impressed and feel very lucky to be learning from you all. With that, we're going to move on. Thank you, DCP. We will circulate kind of final comments, and I'll leave it all in Lizette's hands from here. If anybody has any concerns, obviously we'll continue to talk about it and try to make sure that we finalize something that is reflective of where we all stand on this issue. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, City Planning.
Thank you very
much. Okay, we're going to move on. I recognize the late hours, so thank you everybody for your patience on this, and thank you for your comments. If anybody has to leave early, I get it. So please, if you have to put your updates into the chat, you can. We'll reflect them in the overall minutes, but we're gonna move on. It's June, so we're gonna start with CB6. If CB6 is available for. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Brewer. Go ahead.
That's
Please.
okay. Can you hear me? I think
Yes,
you can.
we can.
Yes.
Happy
All
to
right.
have
Thank you very much. A couple of things. First of all, as you know, we are trying to save West Park Presbyterian Church. And with Mark Ruffalo and others, we are pushing as hard as we can against the hardship application. I think many of us can testify against the rent guidelines board hikes. We are working not only with the migrants and the families in 4 hotels on the Upper West Side, but now we have 2 more hotels that have opened with single women and couples, no children, and we are trying to be as supportive as we can. I do want to thank Westsiders. They're coming through with so much support for these families. I know the speaker went to Washington, and when she went, we did have a letter to Biden with the same old question: what about granting work authorization to the city's asylum seekers? We had 70 people signing on. I know that Homeland Security just extended TPS for the Haitians and Nicaraguans and others who already have it, but they didn't give anything to the Venezuelans. I am pleased that the mayor has come up with the faith-based shelter program with the houses of worship, and we are working with those in our district to try to implement that program. We also are really concerned about the senior services. I wrote an editorial with Encore Community Services concerned about meals for older adults, but as a member of the budget negotiation team, we're certainly working on that. And I do want to thank the mayor. I think you know that on Memorial Day, we announced that the Soldiers and Sailors Monument at 89th and Riverside Drive is getting $63 million to renovate it. Today, we're having with Councilmember Rivera, and I have another bill to deal with siren noise. It's going to be on the City Council's agenda today at 1 o'clock. And we hope that these pass. I can't tell you how many complaints we get. I chair the Oversight and Investigations Committee. We're having a hearing on the impact of the NYPD Erie Basin Storage Facility fire. And what's very interesting, that's on June 20th at 10 o'clock. That's where the NYP stored a lot of their evidence, and it's now gone. But it's turned out, listening to all of this and preparing that there's a lot of warehouse issues generally. We did also have a joint oversight hearing on the Department of Corrections transportation of detained individuals to court. And there too, there are a lot of issues. I'm also hoping to get more discussion on playgrounds in schools because they're often closed on the weekends and evenings and summers. We'd love to have them open. We also have a bill with other members about requiring the city to include trees, tree canopy, and vegetation in its long-term planning. We are working on lots of things. As you can imagine, we have movies taking place at West 78th and Amsterdam on Friday night at 7:30. Today is the last day of the youth market at the Urban Assembly School for Green Careers at 84th Street and Amsterdam. This has been quite amazing. High school kids becoming entrepreneurs in the garden. Today's at 3:30. And we have support from the Green City Forest, Jacob's Pickle, the Hort, and neighbors. And we have chickens, we have fish, we have bees, and we have growing vegetables and fruits. And they are selling with NYC Grow support, selling green vegetables and fruits. And they're learning how to do that. And they have a beautiful display. On the 20th, also from 1 to 4, we have the Older Adult Tech Clinic. That's at Lincoln Center's atrium. People show up in massive. And then on the 21st, which is the day when is Make Music New York, we are going to be at Martin Luther King High School at 165th and Amsterdam, with lots of music taking place right there on the terrace. I think it's the first time post renovation, which I helped to fund, where there will be music. And then on the 12th of July, we have our usual housing clinic. So I want to thank, that's a great discussion that you just had. The one issue that I would bring up, which I will continue to do so, is how do you measure it so the community knows that this climate issue is being addressed locally? That's one thing that I would add as I proceed and vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Right here, anywhere around here is fine.
We'll go next to CB6. Kyle, if you're available to give an update. Kyle may be away, so we're going to move on to CB7.
Good morning. Councilmember Brewer noted many of the things that are going on in my district, and so I won't dwell on those. We did pass at full board a reso requesting that DOT require community input prior to implementing open streets, which basically define for a season a way of operating in the district that impacts us deeply. Currently, they only require that they give notice, and we think it's important for us to weigh in. We've had one hearing in committee on 5G towers relating to the aesthetics and placement and necessity of those towers. And we will be having a second hearing on the health implications later this month. We had a very important and interesting presentation from the Neighborhood Association for Intercultural Affairs, NICA, on landlord incentives to house the homeless and how they work, who benefits, how to access them. That was well attended. We had a secondary street renaming approval at committee level, honoring Catherine Ferguson, a 19th century slave who freed herself and founded the first Sunday school in the United States. And that would be renaming Central Park West at 95th Street. And tonight we're presenting in committee a study and survey on curb use near schools. We did a survey of 57 schools, 45% of which have some teacher parking, and the rest do not, and 60% have no standing areas permitting safe drop-up of students, and the other 40% do not. And we are asking that DOT and the Department of Education do something to equalize or normalize what standards they use in providing such spaces for schools. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Beverly. Kudos to all of your committees that are doing a lot of work. We'll go to Russell said that he has to drop. So if you saw his comments in the chat, just please take note. And then we'll go to, Barry has asked to go later. So we'll go, I think Marquise is no longer with us. So we'll go to Xavier next. Xavier may be away, so Barry.
Sorry about that. I was helping my youngest is off of school, so I was helping him with the technical.
Xavier, if you want me to go, I can. If that,
yeah. Do you mind, Barry? If that's okay,
sure.
I'd appreciate you checking in. Thank you, team. Appreciate you.
Love 10 a.m. meetings. So CB9 is having our general board meeting tonight, but it's been very active with the committees. I want to also note that this is my final borough board as chair of CB9. 4 years went by very quickly. You will be in good hands as there's only one candidate running for chair, and that's Victor Edwards, our first vice chair. But I will miss these meetings, believe it or not. It's been wonderful. You know, Tricia and the borough president's office, you've been amazing with the transition from the prior BP. But in my update, I want to note that we had a number of items on the agenda this month. We got a briefing on the RAD PAC privatization update for Manhattanville houses, which we are continuing to monitor and make sure go more smoothly than some of the initial projects that went through that conversion. We also have a resolution against a proposed redevelopment of a mental health clinic on the northeast corner of Amsterdam on West 145th Street, 1727 Amsterdam. This is a community-based mental health clinic, which was, this was a model created to replace inpatient psychiatric institutions that were frequently sites of abuse. And it has done extremely well by our community. It served tens of thousands of people, along with a primary care component. And the site is city-owned land that is operated de facto by Health and Hospitals Corporation, but without an operating agreement. And they want to tear down the building, relocate the providers, and build a development with both, I think 60% supportive and 40% affordable housing units. They, of course, hid this from us for 3 years before we found out about it by accident. And so it is our contention that redevelopment of city-owned land has to go through ULURP, because that's what the charter says in 197C. And it just says of real property of the city of New York. It doesn't say by the city of New York. So there's actually case law around this from the Giuliani era that HHC, if it's redeveloping city-owned land, has to go through ULURP. And so the reason we're so intent on this is it's public land being developed with public money. And we feel that, this should be upzoned to R8A, which would allow for much more healthcare space, the full return of services to the site, some ground floor retail, and more housing than is currently being proposed under HHC's proposal. And so we are going to be voting on that tonight, but it does not make sense to miss an opportunity to build as much housing as possible on public land in our district. Other than that, I don't want to go too long, but we have the Riverbank State Park is having its 30th anniversary celebration this weekend. I invite everyone to come up to 145th and 138th Streets, and the park, which is over the Hudson River, is the most visited state park in the park system. I also want to note the passing of former State Senator Franz Leichter on Sunday, who was absolutely instrumental in getting that park built. And it's a real loss for our city, and I'm very sorry he won't be able to make it this Saturday. But Saturday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., come up to CB9 and come see one of the crown jewels of the state park system. And tonight, I almost forgot, we may or may not have the commissioner of sanitation, but if not her, then some senior executive staff to go over the pilot program for containerized waste disposal that is going to be taking place in CB9, about which we're very excited. And we'll also be hearing from Councilmember Borough on that. And this should go, this is a pilot, but if it is successful, it may be rolled out citywide. That would have trash removal from residences, instead of like piling bags up on the sidewalk, would go into a dumpster, a rat-proof container, but like a rat-proof dumpster that would be on the street, in the street bed. So it would take away some parking spaces, but that would hopefully both cut down on rats by removing a source of their food, and also make it easier because it's containerized to be lifted into the sanitation trucks. And so we'll be working very closely with sanitation and DOT on where to site these. But between that and our designation as a rat mitigation zone as part of the Uptown mitigation zone that I think spans 10 and 11 as well. We're very excited to be really addressing, the rat problem that has always been there, but it has been amplified by several orders of magnitude during the pandemic. So lots going on in CB9 tonight. I just want to thank everyone on this board that I've had the pleasure of serving with. It's really been wonderful. And I look forward to staying involved and seeing what the other boards come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I want to move things along, but I just want to, everybody obviously knows how much you've contributed, how much you've been an advocate, really, truly brilliant, adding incredible comments to the conversation and input. So I'm sure I echo everybody here when I say that you are going to be extremely missed. And you don't believe you can come to Borough Board, come hang out with us, spend 3 hours on your Thursday mornings with us. We have no problem.
Well, I may just do that, but thank you very much.
Good. We're going to go next to Xavier.
Thank you very much, Trish and Barry. I hate to see you go, man, but we'll be in touch in our advocacy. So thank you for your service and collaborating in many calls we've had together. Okay, so little bit of unfortunate news. We lost the president of the Community Precinct Council for PSA 5, Carmen Perez. They're having services this week. She was a phenomenal resource and institutional knowledge. She was based up toward Wagner, very involved with public safety and really being a guiding light for many of us in the community. So it was really unfortunate that she passed away suddenly. Unfortunately, back in March, she had been hit at an intersection while she was in her wheelchair. So again, public safety and how we handle our intersections and this is very important. So what's going on in CB11? Yes, rats, and more rats. We had a meeting with the rat czar. It was very helpful, kind of laying out the plan and how we can better educate people and what we can do to mitigate the proliferation of the Norwegian brown rat. But it was a very helpful conversation, and we're going to keep collaborating with the Uptown boards. The other thing we had last night as well, and I'm sure some of you may have heard about Timbali Terrace, which is being developed, as well as the property that's being developed by Ascendant, 2 publicly held lots. And again, we, during our East Harlem neighborhood plan, had taken a position that any publicly held land should be used for affordable housing. However, there was a lot of community pushback, and one of the nuanced things that HPD did not register was that when we sought to create more supportive housing, it was in conjunction with experienced nonprofit housing providers, and for those groups that most fit the need in the district, not from outside. That was something that we raised, and it was under our recommendation of 2.6. But we were also focused both on health and seniors, and that was a nuanced thing, not necessarily the individuals with mental health or substance abuse. We were really focused on those members of our community who did need supportive housing, which were seniors and those, for example, who have HIV. And the other part was prioritizing the homeless placement within the district too. And then the final bit, it was dealing with kind of how we engage with the open space in the community facilities component. So it's been a revisit, if you will, from engagement from 4 years ago in 2019. And we've asked HPD if they would be willing to engage in a forum as we emerge from the pandemic to really get community input, because they are making adjustments to the plan, but they were reticent to say what funding streams were coming to these particular developments. So again, we're hoping to get proper engagement, but we're in the pre-ULERT process. They wanted to certify this month, and we said there's not enough time for us to really engage, and it was very important to have community input. We also had our moratorium for no additional substance abuse clinics, et cetera, and so on, to be cited in the neighborhood. We had passed that resolution calling for moratorium some time ago. It's been renewed, it's been revised to ask for additional resources, so that way we can assess each of the individual providers and have better community engagement as we try to deal with the opioid crisis. So that was a successful business that was conducted. I want to thank the borough president for coming out to the community, for Congressman Espaillat's Puerto Rican Heritage Breakfast over at El Museo. It was great seeing him. I think some people tried to drag him out on the dance floor, but I don't know if they were fully successful. We also went and marched in the parade. Thank you to CB11 members and all members of the Borough President staff who came out, and we had the 116th Street Festival, which was increased by close to 40% from last year. So we are emerging. A lot of events are coming up. We are having our in-person onboarding for our new board members at 101st and Lexington this Saturday, and very excited to get people involved in understanding not just ULURP, but how street co-namings happen, liquor licenses, street closures, et cetera, and so on. So that'll conclude my report. We'll have more information next month. I appreciate everyone in your service, and I hope you have a great weekend for this Father's Day. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Xavier. I was going to do this at the end, but happy Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to any father figures out there. But I know you particularly are constantly dropping off your kids to school, so happy Father's Day. Go ahead. Oh, next we're going to go to Kathy, CB12. Sorry.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Yes, so good morning. I'm gonna keep it brief. I think last month I spoke a little bit about some of the projects that were coming our way. So it's been a really rich month at CB12 in terms of, park redesigns, hearing from, the Bowery BRC on new shelters. And so this month we also had up the hospitality group behind Uptown Night Market, Bronx Night Market, all the night markets. They're seeking to create an addition for Washington Heights in September. So obviously it was crucial for us to discuss that this month, as Dyckman is a big thoroughfare, and where they're seeking to do it right by La Marina. So coming in September, we'll probably have a lot more news about what would be a really big festival, because I know, and thank you to Barry and CB9 for some feedback on night market itself. And then the last thing I'll share, just a quick, because there's a month of celebrations. Today there's going to be a mini ball on the High Bridge with really what's a cool initiative in terms of both sides of the High Bridge. Sponsored by council members, and with Destination Tomorrow, which is an organization serving queer youth, along with La Sala over in Washington Heights. So that should have been kind of boosted around, might be on the MBPO website, but that'll be a good time this afternoon. And yeah, I'll leave it there. It's been exciting, crazy, and I hope everyone, since I probably won't see you all, has a great summer break and at least an opportunity to slow down a little bit.
Thanks, Catherine. Next, we'll go to Tammy in CB1.
So thank you so much. It's busy at CB1. First and foremost, I'm gonna, for those who don't know, our district manager Reynolds left this month and has moved on to.
Tammy, there's something wrong with your audio.
Is that better?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Much better?
Yeah. It goes towards my sadness because let's see, this month we lost Lucian Reynolds, who's our district manager. So if anybody knows people looking for a district manager position, please send a resume our way. He literally left last week, but I feel like it's been a month already. Just saying, it's insane. It's extremely busy right now in CB1. We passed a resolution last month to request that the Port Authority look again at extending the path to Newark, because if you're in Lower Manhattan, it will take you 2 hours to get to Newark potentially by public transit, certainly much faster in cars, which is not what the city is looking to do, according to every climate thing that we have in congestion pricing. But quite frankly, the only way to get to Newark Airport in under an hour from CB1 is to drive somehow. So that's, we requested that they review again, extending the path to Newark. We had another request for revocable consent about bollards around a building. And again, we're gonna do a resolution, I believe in July, asking for a working group or a task force to see what design opportunities that are there that can be pushed through that become cost effective to not have every building surrounded by bollards, because there are other tools available, and it's starting to be more than ridiculous when that is the primary one pushed by our city agencies for cost effectiveness and design. It's not necessarily a great way to green our city, nor to really have it be as friendly as possible. Congestion pricing is off the charts for its effect on Lower Manhattan. Whether or not you support it does not deny the issues that Battery Park City has, being on one side of West Street. And we passed a resolution that was supported the full board, asking for a full residential exemption, because to be told that if you leave Battery Park City, even to go into the zone to cross the street, you'll be charged daily. If you're using a car for business, for other things, it's a bit insane. So in general, we support congestion pricing, but we are looking for a full residential carve out because of the way it's been organized, and not something where you're telling someone who makes 60 grand a year that they can take 10 trips and then apply for a rebate afterwards. I mean, it doesn't seem workable and feasible for us. Open restaurants and licensing, we've noticed a change that has been coming through with restaurants who have roadbed dining either expanding or changing their roadbed dining for the new season, but it hasn't been coming to the community board because it's under DOT. And there is a problem when we're looking at the new legislation that the community board, who used to approve sidewalk cafes, is really cut out of the process when we're looking at open restaurants and roadbed dining. And we also are going to be asking for the borough president and all our elected officials to help us ensure that, although DOT only wants to go to a transportation meeting, anything that has to do with roadbed dining and sidewalk cafes belongs in our licensing department, which will then deal with the SLA. For quality of life, we have, as many know, the borough-based jails, City Hall has determined that they would not consider adaptive reuse. We haven't seen the dollar signs or a full survey, but either way, there's been lots of concerns and health concerns with the construction, and we're asking for an independent health monitor for the community surrounding it. We're having troubles getting traction on that, but that is a big ask that we keep continually hammering back on. 5 World Trade Center, we passed another resolution. It's interesting to have the city and state tell us that they can't do a full building with affordability, and yet across the street, a private developer is figuring out a way to do a fully affordable building. So we're looking for opportunities and ways, and maybe Lucian in his new role can help us there. And then this afternoon, we're doing testimony at DEC, who is looking at reevaluating the waters surrounding Manhattan to actually make them swimmable. For those who don't know, you technically can't swim from northern Manhattan down, but the waters are far cleaner, and we are advocating to be able to activate the water all along CB1, because 3 out of 4 sides, and including Governor's Island, would be great. We also have a virtual public workshop on Park Road tonight. I want to thank all of our electeds, the borough president, our city council person, Chris Marte, and all the agencies for helping to get that set up so we can have a discussion of the area connecting CB3 to CB1, and maybe have some unprecedented and beautiful work done to connect the communities and support Chinatown. And lastly, after Pride Month, of course, is July 4th. So we have a lot of historic things happening in the historic district, and I'd be happy to share out, including our Historical Society events celebrating the birth of our nation, starting at Castle Clinton on July 4th, and I'll be sharing that with the borough president to send out with everyone. So we hope to see you celebrating the birth of our nation in Lower Manhattan's historic zones. And with that, if anybody has any and we also testified on Monday for public restrooms, and looking forward to getting more of that rolled out throughout the city. With that, again, if you know a great person for a district manager, send them my way. Have a great Father's Day weekend for everybody who celebrates in any way, shape, or form. And that closes my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Next we'll go to Susan, CB2.
Tammy, I feel your pain. We just, we replaced our district. We got a new district manager at the beginning of this year. It has made such a difference. DMs are unsung heroes. They make things possible that when you do not appreciate them many times until they're not there, and everybody else has to pick up the slack, and it is unbelievable. I don't think I could do my job if I didn't have somebody like Mark to depend on. Certainly will send anybody your way that I can. I also want to pick up on, we just had also a hearing on the congestion pricing, and a similar concern that CB1 has is this idea that you can have residents doing something as simple as circling their own block, and as a result will trigger a fee. And they, if the parameters of the zone don't take into account the realities of the street and the neighbors and simple things like moving the car. So that really has to be examined on just basic, a basic level of fairness. And that was one of the big pushbacks. I mean, it's not that for the most part people supported it, but there's those kind of things that if they're not taken into account, create a really unfair system. We have last month I mentioned about concerns about all of this proliferation of cannabis shops. Happy to say that we're starting to see enforcement. We've seen some big seizures, which has been great. At the same time, we also had this month an application from the Union Square Travel Agency, which is a licensed dispensary working in partnership with the Doe Fund. And they it's great to see that these legitimate operations are getting such positive feedback from the community. Their neighbors love them. Their neighbors are regular clients. We even got positive feedback from the community affairs officer at the 6th precinct. They talked about how these businesses are promoting safety. They are making the street safer. They are making the street, if their business site, cleaner. And they are really a positive influence, on their immediate area. So great to see, hoping for more enforcement. We want to make sure that these businesses don't get choked out by the illegal activities. We have a lot of activities on our streets. One application that I want to specifically talk about was a boutique that is on Mulberry Street, attempted to do what they called was a charitable event, which involved setting up a basketball court with stadium seating that, when they laid it out on the plan, appeared to be physically impossible, especially when it included the required fire lane. But due to a lot of community opposition with both the small businesses and the neighbors, SAPO rejected it. It was clearly not a safe thing. But what we then saw, or at least I got a report of, was that the business had its event, but it moved it just outside of CB2 and held it in Sarah Roosevelt Park. And while it's better to have something like this in a park, clearly they didn't have time to get any sort of approvals. This is something that I'm seeing more of, is that there are, businesses or other groups simply bypassing the permitting process. I don't know if any people saw this, but recently in Soho, a pop-up was set up literally inside a dry cleaners, attracted huge crowds. Eventually the police came and had to make arrests. And nobody knew about this event because they never came and looked, requesting any sort of application. And it would really be helpful to get some guidance on what do you do when you find out about these after the fact. Is there some way of holding, people accountable for not even attempting to, participate in the process and, and just hold it, because many times these events, they'll claim that they don't need an activities permit. It's all being held indoors, but then they set up an event that by its nature attracts so many people that it flows out onto the street. If you were aware of it, you'd say, there's no way that you're not going to need part of the street to contain this. And, but then it then devolves into a police activity. Happy to say that we again had a multi-agency meeting regarding 388 Hudson Street. It looks like we're seeing some real cooperation between the agencies, and it looks like we may be able to really see significantly greater numbers of affordable housing units than was originally projected. Cautiously optimistic. I want to also thank Councilmember Bottcher for showing up, for providing support, and also supporting the idea that what would be appropriate here is a community facility a year, maybe to replace our Dapolito Center, which is over 100 years old. And despite the fact that there is money been budgeted for its, repair and restoration, may not even be feasible. It would be great to see money put into something that is going to work, instead of trying to shore up, a structure that is, 110 years old, that just may be beyond saving. I think that's enough.
Okay,
thank you. Happy Father's Day, everyone. And
thanks, Susan. We'll go next to Tariq had to leave us, so we'll go to CB4.
Morning, everybody. Just 3 quick updates. Tier 94 continues to be a concern. There was a big article in the New York Times about it, and with thanks to Borough President Levine for sending a letter on this, and also seeking follow-up from EDC on this. We're hoping we can at least get some public improvements as a requirement of the deal. I don't expect the financing to change, but at the end of the day, it's a total giveaway from the city to Vornado. A recommendation and a thought, as we continue to help the city manage on the asylum seeker crisis and their use of hotels in the district, many of those folks are finding jobs being deliveristas and using bikes to have a job. At a hotel on 57th Street, we recommended the implementation of a huge bike corral. DOT turned it around within a week, and all of a sudden bikes were no longer being locked to trees, on the sidewalks, to scaffolding. And so we're beginning to really recommend this as a part of when it's coming to the neighborhood, because again, the points of contention are that the city is not meeting the needs of those folks who are arriving here and the residents. And we find when that infrastructure is actually put into place, you kind of have a better environment that you create. So we're pushing for this as a regular part of our ask. I know this is minute, but it does kind of make a difference sort of in the long run. And then finally, I'm running out the door to go help cut a ribbon at Chelsea Waterside Park, which is in Hudson River Park at 23rd and 11th. One of the first parks created as part of Hudson River Park in Chelsea. It's its first park refresh, and it's getting bathrooms that are carbon neutral with solar panels and all recycled materials from the original park design. So just a really exciting moment. And obviously many of us are thinking about new parks in our district and how we can refurbish them. And this could be a model for how you can reuse existing materials on the new design going forward. So off to that. Thank you, Tricia, and thank you, everybody. And congrats and good luck, Barry.
Thanks, Jeffrey. We'll go to Vicky, CB5.
Morning again, everyone. I'd like to thank Barry. I'm really sorry to see you go. Your contributions to the Borough Board have been very much appreciated, and I know you're going to be sorely missed. So my recommendation would be for you to wait the time required and then run again for chair. We'd love to see you back. Okay, so hang on one second. I'm going to try to be very quick. I know it's late. We have 11 new members who have joined CB5. And last week on the Monday before our full board meeting, the committee chairs and I had the opportunity to meet 8 of them in person at the new members orientation. The reason I'm mentioning this specifically is because I think we have another 4 slots to be filled. And so this cycle, we will have one of the largest numbers of new members joining the board ever. So I think it's going to be a very challenging year ahead. As requested, we sent a letter to Councilmember Rivera outlining our support and concerns regarding the proposed City Council open restaurants legislation. We are very much in agreement with a good portion of the legislation, and I'll just mention the areas of concern, which include the appropriateness of the selection of DOT as the agency given major responsibility for managing the permanent program under the law, due to the agency's lack of experience regarding the dining and hospitality industry. The legislation's sector rate schedule and whether it has the granularity to reflect fair market value for permit and consent fees, the set hours of operation as they limit the ability and discretion of DOT and the community boards to balance operating hours with what is suitable to specific neighborhoods. We also have a problem with the permit and consent fees listed specifically because they may not generate enough revenue to support the overhead of the permanent program. And lastly, the 4-year license period is way too long, especially in the early stages of the program. We strongly recommend that in return for the substantial benefit of the use of the public realm in the form of this sidewalks and curbside, the licensees give back amenities for public use in addition to the fees for the licenses and consents. And we specifically propose that the use of establishment bathrooms for the general public, according to fair rules, is a reasonable step for the licensee to take to give back to the community and should be referenced in the legislation. Next, and directly related to the letter to Councilmember Rivera, we passed our resolution recommending the open restaurants program include public bathroom access in exchange for the use of our public realm. We called on our legislators, on the DOT, and on DCWP to amend Intro 31-2022 version B, sidewalk cafes and roadway cafes, to include access to public bathrooms so that our public realm can be more equitable, clean, functional, and attractive. Lastly, we passed our resolution regarding DCP's proposed changes to the zoning resolution that we spoke about this morning, so I won't go into any detail. I already mentioned that we asked for the reform of the environmental quality review technical manual. And with that ends my report from CB5. Thank you and good luck, Barry.
Thank you, Vicky.
All righty, guys. I think with that, that ends our chair reports. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If we didn't say aye, do we get to keep Barry?
You can hold him on the Zoom screen for as long as possible. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your week. Have a good start of your summer.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye.
Barry, look at your email.